When we talk about innovation, we often focus on success stories, breakthroughs, technologies, outcomes, understandably so. But far less attention is given to something or an area which is equally important, which is where things often stall. Many promising ideas do not make it beyond what is often described as the messy middle, or some more pessimistic people call it the valley of death, which is the space between research, development, and real world application. So in Malaysia, we have made significant investments in STI. We have strong policies, we have institutional support, yet translating these into consistent outcomes remain an ongoing question and ongoing challenge. So today, rather than starting with solutions, we'll begin by asking, how should we understand first this messy middle? Because we need to understand it sufficiently before we manage to actually break through and solve this conundrum, and what it might take for us to move through it effectively for the betterment of the nation. So without further ado, I would like to invite our first presenter, our first panelist, Yang Mulia Academician Dr. Tengku Azman Sharifadin.
What is innovation and why is it a problem, a challenge for Malaysia? One of the interventions that we made, we created the RDICE program, research and development, then you go to innovation, we start from there. It continues into commercialization, and then, of course, it reaches the economy. And the circle keeps going round. Basically, that is the ideal situation. In Malaysia, unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. This is where it becomes very messy. There is a broken bridge, and that bridge actually is between, on the right, the researchers, and on the left, the users of research, which is the industry, or I would say society in general. Why is it a broken bridge? It's because we are not talking to each other. Basically, we speak two different languages. On the left, business speaks about the language of making money and profits. On the right, the scientists and researchers are talking about intellectual output. Why we are having a challenge in innovation? For more than 40, 50 years, I've been dealing with this issue with our experts from the ministries of finance, for example, Ministry of Trade. We have a problem of jumping across the so-called middle income trap. And when I spoke to experts many years ago, I go back to maybe 1980s, my friend Sulaiman Mahbub told me there is something called total factor productivity, or TFP. Economists in the room will understand what it means. Basically, there are three factors that contribute to economic growth. First, labor. Second, capital. Third is TFP. When you look at the three, labor and capital, you understand people work and then people use capital to produce value. Then you take out all the contributions by capital and labor. What is left is TFP. So TFP is a consolidated number that actually measures your innovativeness. Currently, our country has 20% labor contribution, 40% capital, and lastly, another 40% roughly TFP. In other countries, TFP is more like 60, 70%. So we are far behind. Why is that so? For the period between 2000 and 2019, we actually grew. You can see that if you look at on the east, call it east, west, north, south. East is economic growth. We actually grew. But you go south, environment impact, we actually regress. And you go west, social impact also regress. So both social well-being and the environment suffered because we focus purely on growth. On the top, the north, the SDI ecosystem remains static for 19 years. So currently, we should do more studies, but I suspect it's still at the same place. So for the last 20, 30 years, maybe it's been the same. So this is our challenge. This is the reason for our weakness. Most of the GERD is actually forked out by the government. The number has been going up and down, but the latest figures is about 50-50 split. That's not enough. In some countries, our Korean colleague will speak later. In Korea, I believe it is already 78% private sector. Only 23% is coming from government. We used to spend so much money on the basic and applied, not enough on translation and experimental work. So that's going to change. Now, what has ASM intervened in? The latest one, just over a year ago, we actually proposed this to re-empower the National Science Council, which is chaired by the Prime Minister. JKPSN is actually chaired by the KSN. It is meant to actually integrate a whole of government approach towards STIE. The Secretariat that supports it, NSC Advisory Panel, which I chair. Very honored to do that. Now, the three should work together to actually enable and facilitate the performance of mission-oriented national initiatives. So that is being put into practice right now. This is how we actually see the mission. It is not our picture. It comes from Mazzucato's book. You can get a copy if you like, Mission Economy. We have to start with grand challenges of the country. Then we actually formulate a mission. For each grand challenge, a mission. Once we have a clear mission, which are actually bold goals that we want to achieve in a certain period of time, a certain cost, we decide on which sectors we have to deal with. So in other words, a mission-oriented program is nothing to do with sectors. It is to do about shaping the market, shaping the country's economic growth. Once we understand the sectors, then we bring them all together to create mission projects. So under every mission, there'll be maybe dozens of projects, and they are all integrated. They are whole of government and whole of society projects. Anyone can do it. We are actually doing 6 mission-oriented projects right now. Let me just conclude by saying, what is the solution to our problem? The solution to actually is to create a working innovation ecosystem. Our claim is that the innovation system does not work. It is a broken system. So how do we make it work? Is by getting everybody to work together. We cannot afford to have everybody serving a certain mini agenda, but does not speak for the whole country. We must speak for Malaysia as a country. What do we together want to achieve? This is what the mission is all about.
Thank you very much, Dato'. I think you touched on a few very interesting things, namely the disconnect between academia, industry, and government. I would like to invite our second presenter, who's joining us online all the way from Seoul, South Korea. Dr. Byung-Won Park is the Senior Research Fellow of STEPI, or the Science and Technology Policy Institute. So, Dr. Park, the floor is yours.
I guess the mass media isn't unique to the Malaysia. In fact, this is the very nature of the innovation. Korea may be the strong in STI, but it is by no means exempt from this problem. If anything, the more the R&D budget grows in South Korea, the worse that this problem gets. Especially from the inside the perspectives, this picture looks even more pessimistic. I guess you share the same feeling. I just keep trying to give some study done by OECD, which published in March 2025. I'll walk you through the 3 representative cases that were analyzed in the studies. You can download from the OECD website for free. The first case is the third comprehensive plan to solve the societal problems we call the CP3, covering 2023 to the 2025. Its core objective is to use the science and technology to address the societal problems that matter most of the Korean citizens, like ultimately aiming for happy societies. I hope so. It is led by the Minister of Science and ICT, also backed by the Presidential Advisory Councils on Science Technologies. What makes the CP3 distinctive is how the problem is identified and formulated through the big data analytics, citizen survey of the 1,000 members of public, and then foresight studies. Out of 43 society problems across the 10 domains, 5 were designated as the core missions: aging, cyber crimes, fine particle matters, microplastics, and household waste. The case two is the national strategic policy. It's the quite old and familiar to the Korean R&D papers. It was launched in 2022, like a society focused one. This one is the more technology focused one. Its goal is to foster strategically important technology for the economic goals, also diplomacy, security, and the new industry creations. It covers 12 strategic technology area, also about 50 sub-technologies, which include micro semiconductors, AI, quantum computing, next generation nuclear, something like that. And then the third case is the called Alchemist recording. It's a DARPA-like. It's a challenge-based iron programs launched in 2022 by Ministry of Trade and Industry and Energy. Its target is the high risk, high reward research on the bold society challenges. Things like reverse aging, sustainable alternatives to plastics, AI-driven medicine, something like that. In the OECD case studies, 3 cases to analyze and diagnose, but in fact, all the R&D programs that South Korea carried out of the last 50 years actually is the typical example of the MYP. So we do have the mission to catch up the advanced countries. In the latecomer countries that pursue the industrial policies, this concentration tended to be even more pronounced. The South Korean case demonstrated a particular specialization in acceleration-oriented missions. Korea's innovation has several genuine strengths for MYP. First, we do have the strong SDI governance, tax, and the SDI office has the cross-ministerial coordination authority backed by the law, and then they report directly to the president. Secondly, advanced post-site capacity. And then thirdly, the cross-ministerial coordination. This is quite difficult, and we do have the problems, but we're trying to solve these siloed structures. And finally, the higher investment intensity. But what I think, when I will look up to this MOP programs, the capacity related to MOP cannot go beyond the boundary condition of the national innovation systems. But for South Korean case, we do have the strong committee, SDI policies, but there are too many ministry bureaus engaged in R&D activities at the moment. Right now, about over 35 ministry and the bureau has their own R&D programs. Definitely, they lead to the coordination problems. Also, too many R&D, research and innovation policies, too many programs, projects, initiatives that lead to the fragmentation. It looks fine, the Korean innovation systems, but we do have the problem. Okay, too many programs, too many ministries, also strongly focused on economic development. So we do have some problem in adopting some policy instrument. This is just a diagram showing the objectives SDI policies, the shifting from competitiveness toward sustainability, inclusiveness, and security issues. So that's why the mission-oriented policies comes up. We already had the old type of the mission-oriented programs, but this sustainability, inclusiveness, and security call for transformative mission. But that's not easy because I already told you your performance in the MOP is bounded by your capacity in the national innovation systems. But this is the challenges that we have to face and solve and address during the long journey of the program. Governance problems, legitimations, normally tended to the technology innovation, institutional inertia, capacities, and the geographies, and the politics of scale. It causes the problem. Definitely, you should have the bottom-up approaches. You should have the technology-based ones. You should have the technology-based ones, which altogether you can design the mission-oriented initiatives.
It's very interesting to hear and see the success stories in countries like Korea. We've always looked up to countries like South Korea in terms of STI innovation, not just the success stories, but the lessons learned. To take it back to a somewhat local perspective, I'd like to invite our next presenter, Puan Adrina Riza Alwi, is from MITIS and IMP Delivery Management Unit, or DMU.
I'm just going to give you a brief overview about the new industrial master plan. Thanks to presentation by Dr. Park. In fact, Korea's one was one of those that we use as benchmarks in developing our own NIMP. In fact, some of the items that he highlighted just now resonate very well in the way we translate our own policies and also adopting the principles that he already highlighted. Okay, let me just give you a context of our manufacturing sector. Of course, throughout the whole of GDP, MITI is in charge of a quarter of it, which is the manufacturing sector, contributing about 25% of our GDP. So that shows how important the sector is. And about 80 to 85%, our recent numbers are showing that we are exporting 85% of our exports are coming from the manufacturing sector, and 17% of employment are also contributed by this sector. So against this backdrop, we understand how important the sector is. There's another number that I want to throw in here. The GHG emission manufacturing sector is the second largest contributor to carbon emission after energy. So I think these are the factors that shape our new industrial master plan and how we use mission-based approach to change the narratives to formulate a policy that could transform the industrial sector to become more competitive as well as more sustainable in the future. And then we look at past industrial master plans. So we have 3 in the past. So the recent one is IMP3. So despite being very important contributor to the GDP and to jobs, we are very lagging behind in terms of economic complexity. We saw other countries increasing faster and moving up the value chain faster, whereas we increased very marginally over the last 10 years. And then the second factor was on investments. Investments are also decreasing, especially the domestic investments. The other one is on disparity across states are very evident, and they are getting more intense, especially you see all the investments are targeting into highly industrialized states such as Selangor, Johor, as well as Penang. So we would want to see the wealth of the nation contributed by the manufacturing sector is spread across the nation. So we are like 97 to 98% of our manufacturing are SMEs, but they are contributing less to our exports and also less to the economic growth. And I think finally, this is one of the key pillars that we use as our mission in our mission-based approach, NIMP, is on productivity. We were so dependent too much on foreign labor that our productivity stagnated. And then we could see some of the ASEAN member states, so they are increasing their productivity faster than Malaysia. So these were our main key challenges. So we took a radical change or radical move to actually change the narrative rather than sectoral-based policy, industrial transformation policy, using past IMPs as an example. We changed that to use mission-based approach. So we were very focused on implementation. We established delivery management unit to track the progress of all the initiatives. And then we mobilized the whole of government approach to actually get other ministries to also be part of this industrial transformation. I think one of the other things that set us apart is the mobilizing the new capital market financing to actually help finance some of the industrial projects. So we cover 21 sectors plus 4 new growth sectors where we think that this would be the one that could really drive the transformation. And we have prioritized key sectors based on their current GDP contribution and also high employment in this sector, and also the proximity to increase their economic complexity when it comes to production. So to address the marginal economic complexity increase, so we actually introduced our first pillar, and advancing economic complexity. So we look at semiconductor moving up the value chain from simple assembly and testing to producing IC design, also wafer fabrication, specialty chemical, aerospace industries, medical device, pharmaceutical. So we are moving up the value chain. So investments are no longer valued at their absolute number, but looking at how complex the product is. And then our second pillar is to address the labor productivity and also reducing dependency on foreign workers. So we are deploying a lot of all the technology for manufacturing sectors and also companies and factories to digitalize themselves. We introduced a mission-based project under this one, so that is all aligned with the mission-based approach by Mazwato. So we have 3,000 smart factory as our target by 2030. So we also engage other ministries such as MDEC to be part of this journey to help us to produce local technology solutions, to help companies to use their local technologies, and since these are accessible and so affordable, at least they can start their digitalization journey early. The third one is to address all those emission factors. So this is push for net zero. This is something that we were questioned when we developed an IMP 3 years ago. Why is MITI looking at environment? So I think I did mention just now, we are the second largest contributor to GHG emission. And finally, to address the economic disparity across states, we introduced economic security and also inclusivity as our fourth mission. So these are the four missions that shape the industrial transformation policy, that is NIMP 2030. And we hope to achieve all those that we have targeted by 2030. And we introduce co-safe financing, co-investment financing with the private capital market, where we inject either half of the amount or a quarter of the amount in high impact projects. So this is managed by Securities Commission. So now we don't give grants anymore, but we co-invest in your project. So this is the mission-based projects that we mentioned. So within 7 years, we hope to achieve this GDP contribution by manufacturing sector, employment, as well as the median salary. Median salary is something very critical. So we hope that by producing more complex products, introduce all those digitalization and automation, we are creating more high-skilled jobs for the people, which will translate into higher salary.
So when we talk about the messy middle, we often talk about the ecosystem and the supply chain. So we are honored to have our last presenter today, someone who represents to me the private sector, the business side of things, because we always talk about the disconnect between business demands and what we are producing, etc. So please welcome Mr. Chan Kee Siak. He's the founder and CEO of Exabytes Network Sendirian Berhad. Mr. Chan.
Thank you very much. We talk about the messy middle. In fact, this is super common within the startups and also among the industries and corporates. And it's also a lot of time, right? We startups, we actually fail to commercialize because of the timing and also the momentum. Or sometimes we over-focus in just solving a very tiny bit of the problems while we may neglected, the bigger needs outside in the real world, in the market. Yeah. And of course, in the market where we are, continuous funding is also essential because it's not just about the research and development, but more importantly, the outcome we came out from the research and development. How can we bring it forward to the commercialization stage? So before pandemics or 1-2 decades earlier, I think the world we are in are a lot more simpler, right? If you open a restaurant, you just make sure you serve the food well, you take care of your customers well. But today, to open restaurants, you must make sure you provide Grab delivery. You must make sure, it's integrated with all the social media, Google marketplace, etc., etc. So it's no longer that silo, right? In the past, manufacturing car is straightforward, right? 4 wheels, engine, the car can move. But today, the car, you must talk about the battery, you talk about the connectivity. The cars might have apps that you can access the car without physical keys, right? So it's no longer a silo. It's a multiple areas that has to be integrated together to make it relevant to today's world. So what is really broken today, right? Often is I think the R&D in many cases really took too long, and the users and market already changed when you came out from the labs, right? So this is it's an ugly truth, but it's happening, right? So we must actually embrace a new world of doing the research and development and innovation, right? While we are focusing on doing the R&D, but also constantly checking what's happening out there in the market, right? Whether the user requirements change or the macro market environment also change. And the other common issue I'm seeing is that everyone is trying to solve the same problem using the same methods, right? So in that, we don't get like a different outcome. A mission-oriented approach, right? For me, from the industrial context, I think in a simple lingo, I think it's very similar to what we have been practicing in the corporate industry. Things like OKR, right? Objective and key results, right? Or some maybe now practicing OGSM, which is also related to the objective, goal, strategies, and measurement, right? Just I think the grand challenges, mission-oriented approach. This is in a slightly macro context, and what they have in common is about the alignment, right? When you have grand challenges, you have your smaller missions, right? Similarly to OKR and OGSM, all these are about alignment, right? From top to bottom, and bottom align back to the top. Example of a good grand challenges, right, is about how to put a man on the moon, and not just send a man to the moon. Most importantly, how can we bring the man back safely, right? And of course, to do either one of these, you need huge funding, right? And not just huge funding, but you need huge continuous funding. And I think the part of it, very important, is we have to ask ourselves why we are doing all this. Of course, we can answer why we need to bring the man back to the earth, right? But more importantly, at the first place, why we need to have these grand challenges to send the man to the moon. Okay, so how missions navigate in the middle, right? I think there are two approaches. One is super focus, right? You focus on a very specific issues or problems. Else, you must focus on the mission that is big enough, right? So that you can move a lot of people, you can move a lot of resources. And fundamentally, back to just now the example to the moon, right? Why are we doing all this? So how to orchestrate, right, within the various sectors, right, from the government, industries, academias, societies, and of course also private sector, right? What's our current pain point, or what's our common problems statements that we are seeing, right? And with that, we find the alignment, right? And with the inputs and also the feedback loop, that's where you translate to the what we call the grand challenges, right? Then how can all the stakeholders come in and align with the missions? But we have a problem here, right? By default, I think our education system, especially primary and secondary, is not designed to train or encourage innovations. We were designed to train to follow rules, right? We want to produce more followers. So that's where, if we were to address the bigger challenges, it's often, I think we need to also trace back to, some of the root cause, some of the earlier processes. Is that still relevant, or we need a more innovative approach to disrupt it? And after all, I think, the governance, right, the guardrails is important, right? This is where a lot of time we are missing out the important part, which is checking. We have reporting, but we don't have a good checking system, right? Whether the things being reported, are they correct? Are they real? Are they relevant? Are they aligned back to the original mission statements? So since I'm from the digital world, so I'll just also share some our example here. So for our company, is a very simple grand challenges, which is by 2030 to digitalize or empower 1 million businesses with digital and help them to grow using digital. So that's our ultimate grand challenges. And that will then translate to, how to approach it. How can we break it down to a smaller mission? So in today's AI world, I think this is where technologies can come to the place, right, to actually support and empower the research, the innovation. So I think a lot of time is not exactly, whether we succeeded in our original mission. It's about throughout the journey, what have we discovered, what have we learned. But in the older approach is a lot of these process in between, it might be lost track, in between, right? Because there's a lacking of tracking, lacking of a systematic way to approach it. But today with the blockchain, right? If by making good use of blockchain, that's where all these intermediary processes can be captured in a very structured scientific way, and making good use of AI and machine learning to later on go back to review the whole journey, right? And from there to curate out what are our great learning, and perhaps sometimes all this learning is turned out to be the real innovations. So missions turn the messy middle into a design path, right? We need to start with great challenges, orchestrate the wheeling, and run a learning portfolio. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Round of applause to our panelists.